Cold rain glazed the runway lights as our plane coasted to a stop, and in that breath between landing and arrival, I let myself believe Uncle Rayhan's soft promise. Dubai will feel like family. The belief lasted only until we stepped from the airport into silence. No crowd, no greetings. Just a driver in an immaculate suit who bowed, snatched my passport, and motioned us into a black sedan. Uncle Rehan's hand rested on my shoulder with proprietary weight. I was used to that, the gentle pressure that reminded me I now belonged nowhere but with him. We drove without music. Neon ridges of skyline drifted by like holograms, bright but unreachable. The villa waited behind bronze gates, 3 stories of marble and unlit windows, its entrance framed by carved dates in a language I couldn't read. Inside, footsteps echoed too loudly, as if the house had been empty for years and disliked new voices. A woman appeared at the threshold of a corridor, a maid in a modest gray uniform, wisps of silver hair pinned tight. She lifted a finger to her lips, then let it hover toward the front door in a barely perceptible plea. "Leave while you can." Uncle Rayhan didn't notice. He was signing documents handed over by a tall man standing in shadow. That man stepped forward, light catching delicate planes of his face. Early 30s, perhaps, with eyes a quiet shade between sorrow and calculation. "I'm Aarav," he said, his accent faintly Indian, his smile precise. He thanked my uncle for the guardianship, arrangement, and spoke of schooling, tutors, and opportunity. Every syllable struck me as scripted, but his gaze lingered on me with a warmth I'd not felt in months of drifting from relative to relative after my parents' accident. I answered haltingly, trying not to stare at the tight line of his mouth. "Keys." Changed hands. Uncle Rayhan squeezed my fingers in farewell, too quickly, then vanished down the steps, the sedan's taillights bleeding red across the gravel. The gates clanged shut with a finality that settled in my chest like cold iron. Aarav guided me through polished hallways, pointing out a library I could use whenever the mood struck. Bookspines glimmered, untouched. When he spoke of my future studies, color crept to his cheeks, as though earnestness surprised even him. Dinner was prepared, but our plates cooled untouched. Aarav claimed a late meeting and left me alone at a long oak table. The maid, passing silently, set a small bowl of soup before me, then slipped a folded scrap of paper beneath the spoon. Her wrist bore a faint yellow bruise. She didn't meet my eyes. I waited until her footsteps faded and opened the note. "Run." Just that. No name, no explanation. I pressed it flat, heartbeat drumming so loudly the chandeliers seemed to vibrate. Night thickened. From my bedroom window I watched storm clouds erase the moon above the Persian Gulf. Lightning flashed, illuminating the courtyard's stillness, and in that white glare I saw the maid standing below, palms upturned, as if pleading with the sky or with me. It was hard to know. I let the curtains fall, clutching the note, torn between gratitude for unexpected shelter and a creeping dread no storm could drown. Morning arrived wreathed in desert haze, softening the villa's hard lines and lending its silence a deceptive gentleness. I woke to sunlight pouring through gauze curtains and the fragrance of cardamom drifting from somewhere below. The maid, Lilia, I had learned from a brass pin on her collar, waited at my doorway, offering a subdued nod before guiding me to breakfast. The dining room looked different by day, less like a throne hall, more like a stage missing its actors. Aarav sat at the head of the table, sleeves rolled to the elbow, reading something handwritten in a leather ledger. At my entrance, he shut the book with a careful thump and gestured to the seat beside him instead of opposite. "Proximity aids conversation," he said, tone light, as if shrinking the distance between us were a matter of simple geometry. We spoke over pastries dusted with pistachio. He asked about the village school I'd left behind, my favorite subjects, even my mother's recipe for lentil stew. Each question felt like water in a desert, proof that someone remembered I had stories worth telling. When I mentioned my father's half-built house, his dream of open arches and shaded courtyards, Aarav's eyes brightened. Architecture, he mused. Then you must learn draftsmanship. There's a studio on the roof we can repurpose. The generosity sounded impulsive yet sincere, and a shy warmth slipped between my ribs. After breakfast, he led me through winding staircases to a rooftop terrace edged with jasmine planters. From here, Dubai shimmered at the horizon, a promise of motion against the villa's hush. He produced a slim sketchbook and placed it in my hands, the paper ivory, unmarked. Every structure begins as a line, he murmured, his voice unexpectedly fragile. Sunlight haloed his profile, and for a moment I forgot the note folded in my pocket. Lilia interrupted. She carried a silver tray bearing tea, and a fresh bruise darkening her wrist like spilled ink. Aarav's jaw tightened. Without a word, he lifted a salve from his pocket, uncapped it, and brushed the ointment over her skin with a tenderness almost paternal. Yet Lilia flinched, eyes brimming with something beyond pain. When Aarav turned away to adjust a sunshade, she leaned toward me. "Basement," she whispered, voice brittle as cracked glass. "Wait for thunder." Then she slipped back downstairs, tray rattling with her trembling. That afternoon I tried to draw but sketched only crooked stairways descending into black. Doubt gnawed at every charitable gesture Aarav had made. Still, when he appeared at dusk holding 2 mugs of cinnamon milk and recounting a lost fiancée whose ring he still kept locked away, compassion overshadowed suspicion. Loneliness recognized itself in him. Night thickened once more, heat pressing against the windows. I lay awake counting heartbeats, telling myself storms were rare this season. At precisely 3 o'clock, a floorboard outside my door sighed. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, approached, pausing just beyond the threshold where moonlight pooled like silver warning tape. My breath caught, the world narrowing to that thin strip of light, and the question of who, or what, waited on the other side. The footsteps retreated before I could summon courage, leaving behind a pulse of questions that throbbed until sunrise. I found Aarav in the library, sleeves rumpled, gaze fixed on blueprints spread across a mahogany table. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted, sliding a rolled plan toward me. "The house needs rebirth. I want your eye on a new, lower level." His fingertip traced stair lines that ended at a shaded rectangle, exactly where Lilia's warning pointed. I swallowed my fear. "What's down there now?" "Storage," he said too quickly. Then, softer, "Memories I no longer need." The earnest crack in his voice held me the way a lullaby might hold a restless child. To doubt him felt like cruelty. Yet Lilia found me later in the garden court, pruning shears trembling in her hand. "You believe his music," she hissed, clipping a rose so violently petals scattered like spilled secrets. She tugged her collar, aside revealing a thin pale scar curving over her shoulder blade. "I too was precious once." Her eyes darted toward surveillance cameras perched under eaves. "He buys loyalty, then buries it." She pressed a cold metal cylinder into my palm, a flashlight, heavy despite its size. "When thunder comes, see the truth yourself." She backed away, slipping into the service corridor like a ghost retreating. Into walls. That afternoon, clouds massed over the gulf, bruising the sky. Aarav and I worked at the drafting table, pencils traveling across paper in hesitant partnership. He spoke of shapes that breathe, homes that listen to wind, futures free of loneliness. The poetry of it coaxed my own dreams onto the page. A courtyard, echoing my father's vision, a lattice roof catching filtered light. Our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved away. Rain began as a whisper, then a roar. The villa lights flickered. Aarav excused himself to secure the generator. I waited until his footsteps faded, then crept to the corridor that ended at the basement door. The lock hung open, its bolt withdrawn as though expecting me. Thunder cracked, rattling chandeliers overhead. In that reverberation, I descended. Concrete steps narrowed into a throat of darkness. I clicked the flashlight, its beam sliced through dust and cobweb threads, landing on framed photographs lining the staircase. Each showed a different teenager standing beside Aarav, stiff with hope. Beneath each portrait, a brass plate listed a date, abruptly ending with a dash and nothing after. The most recent was yesterday's. At the landing, I found a row of cramped quarters, their doors labeled by initials matching the photographs. Inside one, a child's backpack lay open, textbooks mid-lesson, as though class might resume any minute. My pulse hammered, my breath fogged the torch lens. Deep within the corridor, a charged silence thrummed, broken only by the drip of unseen water. I forced myself forward until the beam illuminated a polished metal door. On it hung a single index card bearing my name in neat calligraphy, beneath which someone, Lilia, had scrawled in trembling ink, "Not too late." I reached for the handle, knowing the next revelation would fracture whatever trust remained. The handle turned with a reluctant groan, releasing the sterile scent of disinfectant. A single lamp buzzed overhead, exposing a room neither cellar nor prison, but operating theater. Stainless steel gurney, glass cabinets of labeled organs preserved in coolant, and a medical file opened to an anatomical diagram, my silhouette, outlined in red. My pulse surged loud enough to drown the thunder still rumbling above. Aarav emerged from the shadows, lab coat gleaming like freshly drawn moonlight. Gone was the architect of dreams. In his place stood a surgeon of necessities. "I hoped you'd never see this," he began, voice trembling between apology and resolve. "But storms have a way of prying open secrets." I backed toward the doorway, flashlight trembling. "You said memories, not this." Words frayed in my throat. He stepped closer, palms raised. "Listen, I was 9 when hereditary failure hollowed my organs one by one. Wealth bought me time, but donors are scarce. I vowed no child would die so invisible. Each ward here receives the finest education, comfort, and a chance to save countless lives through me." His speech unfurled like practiced liturgy, devotion masquerading as logic. Tears blurred my vision. "That's not salvation. It's theft," I whispered. "You trade futures for your own." He faltered, pain flickering across features I had nearly trusted. "You, though, you're gifted. We could build places where no orphan feels rootless again. Share my name, my estate, live." Lightning cracked, and Lilia burst through the door. Phone held high, she streamed the tableau. In real time, screen aglow with scrolling comments and an emblem of Dubai's Child Protection Bureau. Her voice steadied. "It ends tonight." Aarav's eyes darkened, yet he didn't lunge. Instead, he unfastened a pendant from his neck, a ring on a chain, the fiancé's relic, and placed it on the gurney. "Then let the world judge." He knelt, wrists offered. Surrender looked nothing like defeat. It looked like exhaustion. Sirens crescendoed outside, red strobes leaking through basement vents. Officers stormed in, faceless behind riot visors. They cuffed Aarav gently, almost reverently, leading him past me. As he passed, he whispered, "Finish the house. Make it breathe." I couldn't answer. Grief and relief tangled too tight for speech. Lilia's hand found my shoulder, grounding me amid chaos. Together we emerged into rain-swept dawn where patrol cars idled. Stretchers carried the other children up from hidden dormitories, blinking at freedom as though sunlight were a foreign script. 6 months later, I stood before a reclaimed courtyard sketched from my father's dreams, now funded by assets seized from Aarav's empire and converted into a shelter. Lilia managed the kitchen gardens. Laughter replaced echoes. On opening day, I placed Aarav's ring into the foundation's cornerstone, not as tribute, but as warning. Brilliance without conscience corrodes. That night, addressing new residents, I repeated the maid's first message to me. Run. I told them, from silence that asks you to surrender your voice. The courtyard lights shimmered, and for the first time the villa, reborn, seemed to exhale.